I'm joined by Sky News commentator Kosha Gada and former Labour MP Michael Danby. Guys, thanks so much for joining me. And I want to talk and start with you, Michael, and get your thoughts on the Chinese ambassador's press conference yesterday and his holding up that glass of Chateau Tanunda. What did you make of all of it? And do you think that anybody is fooled by his sort of more reasonable act that takes us away from the old wolf warrior diplomacy that we saw during the Morrison government?
I don't think anyone's fooled. But something can be true even if the Chinese ambassador says it's true. After 2 years, Beijing has folded, and they're going to allow coal exports, and wine, barley, and lobsters will follow. So I think this is the best answer is deploying those HIMARS so successful in Ukraine along our northern sea lines with long range and cozying up to our friends in Japan. So that's a real action answer to that ambassador and the smug totalitarian Chinese government.
Indeed. And Coach, I want to move over to you in the U.S. now, and I want to talk about the fascinating hypocrisy surrounding the classified documents discovered at Joe Biden's sort of vice presidential think tank. Who knew there was such a thing? It's now been revealed, though, that the documents were actually discovered back in November. 6 days before the midterm elections. How convenient that nobody talked about that then. And we're only hearing about it now. What do you make of it all, Kosha, especially after all the hoo-ha over the documents at Mar-a-Lago?
Yeah, and the hoo-ha is obviously still very much ongoing. That story has not ended, James. So, look, this is all politics, both the timing of the fact that they knew about it before the midterms and sat on it, as well as just the instrument of classification in general. I'll just make a quick point that it's really losing trust in the public eye. There's this growing skepticism that it's overused and too many things that shouldn't be classified are overly classified just to allow sort of that veil of secrecy for a government to continue to do things that they don't really have the consent of those that they govern to do. So putting all that aside, this is a political play. Who knows what it's really about? I think it's two scenarios. One possibility is it's the apparatus signaling to Biden that, listen, we've got stuff on you, and if we decide to go there, this is a signal that they might want him to step aside and not run again. This is pure speculation on my part. The other scenario is that they're muddying the waters on the other side to sort of give an out to Merrick Garland and the investigation to Trump. Why? Because they want Trump to run. It would cannibalize the base between him and DeSantis and whoever else. And this is sort of muddying the waters enough to allow for that possibility to take shape. But who knows?
That's a fascinating point, both of those. I'm really interested because I think they're both interesting and they both have a bit of merit to them. Now, Michael, on a similar note, though, I want to talk about, Kosha just mentioned Ron DeSantis, and I want to talk about how the media in the U.S. is now going after the Florida governor. The New York Times has labeled him as, quote, even more radical than Trump. Well, you just knew this was coming, didn't you? And it comes after a big Vanity Fair piece which said much the same. Michael Danby, it's basically the case that whoever is going to be the Republican front runner, the media is going to do everything they can to turn this person into a monster, yes?
So far, all we can see is that DeSantis is a mainstream conservative. His views should be examined for their content. He should be criticised or not if people disagree with his views. But this idea of painting him as a monster is laughable. The mainstream media should stick to the issues as it used to, and I hope there is vociferous in their criticism of the person who I think is going to be the Democrat candidate, the very liberal governor of California.
Well, indeed, and I reckon those the attack ads by the Republicans will absolutely right themselves if Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, runs. They'll just show all those pictures of everything going on the streets of San Francisco and Los Angeles. But, Kosha, I want to stay in the U.S., and after that complete shambles that was the speaker vote in the U.S. Congress last week, now the Republican-led House has made its first move, and one of those moves is voting to kibosh a plan by the Biden administration to unleash 76,000 more IRS agents to poke into the tax affairs of ordinary Americans. Kosha, are the Republicans off to a good start here with this move?
It's something, and I would say that this issue is probably the lowest hanging fruit for them to go after because it was one of the most unpopular things from the Inflation Reduction Act. It had nothing to do with inflation that was put in there, and that headline of the 87,000 agents, which would double the size of the IRS right now. IRS agents are probably the least popular federal employees in the country. So that really had teeth in the media on both sides. It was very unappealing to the entire voter base, or most of the voter base. So they went after it. I don't think it'll survive. The Senate will definitely strike it down and nothing will happen. But listen, right now the Republicans have a slim majority and they've got a whole host of issues that they've teed up. And I think this was probably a good first one to go after because it's very unpopular.
James, it would have made the IRS bigger than the Marine Corps.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. And, you know, you have this whole thing in the U.S. now where payments of as little as $600 between people have to be declared. And, you know, that it just, people were very concerned that this was going to be a real attack on just people's personal finances. But I want to talk now about Iran. And last week we saw the UK declare Iran's Revolutionary Guard a terrorist group. Today we've seen the US call Iran out for supplying drones to Russia, accusing them of contributing to war crimes in Ukraine. And in Germany, 2 Iranian nationals have been arrested for allegedly planning a terrorist attack involving chemical weapons. Michael Danby, I remember a time when Iran was, you know, very much in a box, but now it seems like the world's attempt to get a nuclear deal with Iran means that they're just doing whatever they want. Is it time for Australia to do more about Iran, to say nothing of the rest of the West?
Well, I think we could do something with Magnitsky, sanctions on leading Iranian individuals, but that I think Australia is less important than the international community. This idea of putting ricin, chemical poison, in the water in Germany, it surely signals that Tehran is completely out of control. And it's going to come to a head now the Biden administration admits that this awful JCPOA nuclear deal with Iran is off. And I think there's going to be the necessity for military action. If the International Atomic Energy Agency proves again at its next board meeting that the Iranians are not making public their nuclear-capable material that they've now graded to 90%. Very dangerous country, may have to take action against them. There are various scenarios on TV, including great shows like Tehran, which look at all of these future scenarios. Very worrying. Iran is out of control.
Indeed. And before we go, Kosha, I want to just ask you very quickly about Prince Harry. He's appeared on The Late Show in the U.S., tippling tequila with Stephen Colbert, as his memoir, Spare, is released in bookstores across the globe. But here in Australia, at least, it seems like the book was a bit of a fizzer with very few people, nobody lining up to buy the thing. Kosha, what do you make of this whole Harry thing? I've got to get your opinion before we go to the break.
I think, you know, there is a counter data point, unfortunately, James, and I think it's the highest selling. The velocity of sales in the first 24 hours is the highest selling of all time, displacing Michelle Obama's book. So there's obviously interest in it, whether it's from a place of love or a place of hate. It's just a sad, sad affair. People have talked about it a lot. And to me, actually, a bigger point is it shows how even something like the institution of the monarchy is not impervious to the cultural thing that's happening right now, dynamic around narcissism and airing your dirty laundry out in public and seeking adulation. You know, even they have not escaped it.
Wise words, Kosha Gada and Michael Danby. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.